Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about scalability and elasticity. So this is where we can scale up and we can scale out. And I'll help you to understand the difference between those two types of scaling. So firstly, let's look at scaling up. So in this example, we have a server. So this is a virtualized environment. So we have a server and we have a virtual machine on top of it. And then that virtual machine has a certain amount of virtual hardware. It's running Windows, and then it's got a .NET application running on top of the operating system. So what happens if our virtual instance doesn't have enough resources? It needs more CPU, it needs more RAM, maybe storage space, maybe it needs more network bandwidth. Well, in a scaling up scenario, what we would do is we would add more hardware. In this case, virtual hardware, but in a physical server, you're adding more physical hardware. So now that virtual machine has more resources available to it. So that's how you scale up. So just remember that scaling up means adding resources to the server. And you can keep on scaling, obviously, until you reach some kind of limit on how much resource you have available that you can add. So obviously the underlying server only has a limited amount of physical resources. So you can reach a limit in how much virtual resources you can assign. And a physical server will normally have a limit on the amount of physical resources you can put in it. So there's a maximum amount of CPUs, a maximum amount of RAM that you can put in a physical server, and then you can't scale up anymore. So you do reach that limitation. So the other option is called scaling out. Now when you're scaling out, rather than adding more hardware, what you're doing is you're adding more instances. So you might add an additional virtual machine. So this means you've now got 2 instances of your application running. You might then add more on other hardware. So now you're scaling your application. You've now got 4 instances of your application running rather than 1. So scaling out is really good for services usually where they don't hold some kind of state information. So for example, if this is some kind of web application, but the data is stored somewhere else, so it's stored in a database, for example, then you can create lots and lots of instances of your application, and your clients can connect to any one of those instances of your application. And it doesn't matter because it's going to be the same experience. So that's the difference between scaling up and scaling out.